unleash your inner Goldilocks, how to get it just right. Thank you so much for joining us for another exciting and insightful conversation. And I cannot get the hour started with you. Let's take a moment, as we do every week, and think about what is Goldilocks reminding us, and why are we building a Goldilocks community so that we can get it just right. To me, Goldilocks symbolizes balance. As a young girl, she knows how exactly she wants things. When she wants to have her porridge or soup, she knows she doesn't want it too hot, she doesn't want it too cold. When she sits down on a chair, lays down on a bed, she knows she doesn't want it too hot or too soft. She wants it just right. Do you remember when you were a young person, a young child, and you not only wanted things a certain way, but you actually knew how to influence people and get things done? If you don't remember yourself, do you remember your children, your nieces, nephews, a child in your neighborhood? Human beings, not just human beings, creatures are born knowing how to influence the others and make others want to do stuff for them. Even before we start talking, we can influence people to do things for us. It is innately something we have. But somewhere along the way, due to social conditioning and everything else we superimpose on ourselves, we've forgotten how it's done and why it's important. Fast forward in our adulthood, we're always trying to figure out, how do I become successful? How do I drive my economic engine? How do I make the money? How do I build my relationships? All of this is predicated on my ability to influence. Research shows that we can all influence only three levels from where we currently are. And every situation, every issue has multiple perspectives. So if I am able to come only from the extreme right end, then I can only influence three levels towards the center. I can only influence people who are three levels towards the center from my position. If I'm already at the extreme left end, similarly, I can only influence three levels towards the center being the operative word. But what if I am able to see situations and problems from various perspectives? And I come from that understanding, because now I'm including everybody's reality, not just my reality. To say that that's not how I see the issue, therefore everybody else's reality is not relevant, I can only work from what I can see for myself, you're already putting yourself at an extreme end. And at that extreme end, you're not being inclusive. Therefore, you're not going to be equitable in your problem solving, because you're not even seeing the problem for what it is, right? Your viewpoint is so myopic. And whatever it is you're solving and bringing to the world as a solution is not going to be received, because you're not coming from that full perspective taking. Imagine the minute you move to the center and you see everybody's realities and everybody's perspective based on how it lands on them. Now I can influence three levels to my right, three levels to my left, and everybody else along that central lane. I've taken the fact of we can only influence three levels from where we are, and because of where I choose to stand, the position I take based on my perspective and getting centered, I all of a sudden have created for myself 7 degrees of influence. That is the starting point of success. That is the starting point of getting things right. And that truly is the starting point of our shared prosperity. Think about what your purpose in life is. Even our purpose sits in the centeredness of three elements: what we love, what we're great at, and what the world needs. I love figure skating. Am I good at it? I can't even stand on ice. Does the world need entertainment and watch people figure skate and ice dance? Absolutely. I can do it in my head, but I can't do it for real. So that is not going to be what my purpose is going to be. I'm going to be entertained by people who do it, but I'm not going to be the one to do it. So being able to understand where my purpose is centered is critical. There are things that's going to give me joy, but I'm not great at. There are things that's going to give me joy and I'm great at, but the world doesn't need it. How do I find that sweet spot to drive my economic engine? And how do I engage in my community so that we all help each other as we come from a place of purpose ourselves? Like we do every week, I am going to give us 3 thoughts, nuggets of wisdom to take into the conversation today. You are going to love our guest, and I will be introducing him in just a couple of minutes. First nugget I want us all to take into the conversation is let authenticity guide the way. Authenticity breeds trust. If we are inauthentic, nobody can trust us. And how do we show up authentically? For that to happen, connect with your being to purposefully channel your doing. Think about that for a moment. How do we each introduce ourselves? A lot of times, especially in the Western world, we introduce ourselves based on what we do. Our identity is wrapped up in what we do, not who we are. Most people can't even tell me who they are. I always start my meetings asking folks to tell me, I would love to hear from you, something about you. Tell me who you are. And I think that's a good place for us to connect. And in 99% of the time, people tell me where they went to school, what degrees they got, what work they do, and what career path they're on. All of that is what people have done. It's not who they are. So I actually would gently nudge everybody to start thinking about how would you introduce yourself if it was not what you do. For example, I would introduce myself as I am a kind, compassionate human being who is embracing the mission of building to last and ennobling for success. And I wholeheartedly embrace the fact that none of us are defined by a single story. Each of us are an evolving epic. And therefore, we need to show up in an ennobling way to make everybody's light shine, and in that process, spark ours too. Has nothing to do with the fact that I have a PhD in finance, nothing to do with the fact that I have a consulting company. Warren Buffett is my client. I ran a $22 billion pension fund. None of that is who I am. Those are things what I do, right? So think about that, and you will realize if you can start thinking about your being and start introducing yourself to yourself in front of the mirror every day, you will start seeing yourself differently. It truly allows you to connect yourself with yourself authentically, and you will build the most important relationship, the relationship with yourself. The relationship with your inner being is the most important one. And a lot of times the problems we have in the workplace is because most people don't know who they are. So everybody shows up posturing to be something they're not, to hold on to the job they have because their identity is wrapped in that job. The second nugget I want us to take into the conversation is being a trusted partner is everything. Your word is your bond. You are trusted because of your honor. My word is my honor, and if I don't keep my word, I am no longer an honorable person. It's not about what can I get over somebody, and I got what I want, and now I can move on. That is not how authenticity works. That's not how you build trust. That's not how you build your brand. Our brand is how we live. Our life is our brand. And the choices we make is our brand. That's the lived experience we are creating for others, and their perception of ourselves based on our choices become our brand. So we have to be very mindful that our word is our bond, and we build that in a way that we become trusted partners. And the third nugget I want us to take into the conversation is human capital is an asset to be ennobled. Folks a lot of times people remind me, Cass, you have a spelling mistake. They think it is enable. Ennoble is an old English word from the days of the ancients, Aristotle and Plato. It is about bringing out the noble qualities in people: kindness, compassion, empathy, humanity, humility, grace, so that everybody can thrive and we build a community as a noble person where everybody is thriving and the society is sustainable. And those of us who are able to give it to other people because we've already found it through the help of other people, we're in the process of ennobling others. So think of every human interaction as an opportunity to ennoble, right? Every time I meet somebody, I learn something about myself and I learn something about the other person. I have a chance to continue to be ennobled, and I have the chance to ennoble somebody else. Bring out the noble qualities in each other so that we are both better versions of ourselves. So ennobling is not the prerogative of the rich or the affluent. It can only spawn from kindness of heart. It has to come from that authentic place, not from any place selfish, not from any place that wants power, not from any place that wants control. If you want to read more about it and get more insight, feel free to read one of the books here, Ennobled for Success. It's on Amazon, but I always like to give some nuggets to set the conversation. Now, let's take a moment and look at our amazing guest. We are going to talk about valuing human capital. And to have this conversation with me, we have Solomon Fulma. Solomon, welcome to the episode. You're muted, Solomon.
What a day.
I know. But you know what? It is an opportunity for us to just be resilient and roll with it.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you, Dr. Cass. It's an honor being here. I really appreciate your take on leadership, and I couldn't be more graced by someone like you. So thank you for having me here.
My pleasure and my honor. Let me give you a brief introduction to Solomon because it's very brief. There is more to him than just this, but as you know, I always love to show the map. We're an international live podcast, and I love for people to see where all in the world we have lived and worked. So Solomon comes to us originally from Nigeria by way of UK into the United States. So obviously, he is culturally intelligent and introduced to a variety of perspectives, which is one of the conversation points we were having. He grew up as a military child. Solomon's best vision of himself was to make people a priority regardless of their background. He values human representation, builds confidence, and encourages a growth mindset. His native name translates to one heart for all. There is no wonder why the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice sits atop his list when it comes to helping organizations gain a vantage point in their strategic human capital planning and overall organizational health. Born in the royal city of Benin in Nigeria, Solomon has served in numerous roles in profit and nonprofit sectors in Nigeria and in the United States of America. His customers span all over North America, including US and Canada. So that doesn't even tip into the tip of the iceberg of who you are. So Solomon, why don't you take a moment and share with us what got you to where you are today? How did you get into the space of equity, diversity, inclusion, the HR space? And how does it inform the way you show up, the fact that you've lived in different places and you've been exposed to different values?
Oh my goodness. What a great way to start the conversation, Dr. Cass. Once again, before I start, I would, I want to sincerely thank you so much for this opportunity. I think everyone does have a need to have a voice in this space and also in the space of works. Um, so yeah, it's been great so far. Your introduction and the theme of your podcast is just so amazing. And even getting into it and listening to the introduction of what Goldilocks stands for, um, it took me back to my childhood. It took me back to um, being the fourth of my siblings and um, having to always be in that space of not being the favorite child, but still being the favorite child of all siblings because I just know how to wrap my parents around my little finger. So thank you so much. So back to the question on how I got to this space. Um, as you have rightly mentioned, I have been in the midst of several demographics and cultures. And true to what my name stands for, connecting with people has always been an integral part of my being. You had mentioned earlier about the need of bringing our true authentic self and how it's so interesting when you ask someone to tell them about yourself. First thing they talk about in the Western world is their accomplishments and degrees and things like that. And over the years, this has acculturated into our being, pretty much giving us this sense of falsehood, of not knowing who individuals truly are. So getting into this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion and the entire HR space in itself stems from the experience that I have lived and also my need to value people, not just as capital, but just as human beings that have this talents that they bring to organizations to share. In the recruiting world, you go out looking for talent. Um, Sometimes you headhunt, but you do it because the organization lacks a specific skill that they need to succeed. Now, in the course of looking for these talents, you do everything you can as a recruiter to brand yourself and also the organization positively. Why would you want to treat someone differently after they've been hired and onboarded? What kind of message as a HR practitioner are you sending to your workforce, to the employee? So I think, in HR, that's a space that a lot of HR professionals really, there is a gap in there and they lack the expertise in continuing that engagement discussion with clients and customers and employees and just the entire stakeholders. But this space of equity, diversity, and inclusion, my experience from there, and the reason I actually delved into that was basically because of the shared and lived experiences that I have been through. It takes someone with grit and experience to actually thrive in that space. So having moved to the United States and encountered my own share of discrimination, it's usually like a slap in the face because it just hits you left, right, and center. And you are like, where did that come from? And I think a lot of it has to do um, with the gap in cultural awareness. Even when you talk about organizations that are globally positioned, there is a huge gap. Regardless if they say an ethnocentric approach isn't part of what their strategy is. But there is still a huge gap in that. So that's why I got into that. Lived experiences, need for change, would need to reconstitute what several laws and acts have been instituted to help us thrive as the workforce, and why, we need to look into that as well. So, but mostly for the lived experience and how to pull back and educate and help, you know, human beings understand that we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And that lived experience and creating that inclusive lived experience is so critical, because not just human beings, every creature on this earth wants to belong. I was watching a video yesterday. There is this leopard that visits the cattle every night, and the villagers were trying to kill the leopard. This is in Pakistan. And they put a camera to see, why is the leopard coming every night? And they realized the leopard comes to a specific cow and then cuddles up to the cow. And when they went back and had conversations with the villagers, they realized, okay, the mother leopard had been killed when the baby was born, and the maternal cow nursed the baby leopard. And so the leopard so the predator and the prey have a maternal parent-child relationship, and the grown leopard comes to cuddle up to his mommy, even though mommy is food, right? So it's inherently in our creature nature to want to belong. It doesn't matter what we look like. Mm-hmm. Provided we have the ability to take a step back and know who we are and connect with who we are. I think part of the trouble we face in the world is everybody's too busy doing what they need to do to get to the next step of doing, because they want the next big thing, the better house, the better car, the better vacation. It becomes chasing things instead of evolving as a being.
Exactly.
So talk to me about the opportunity HR as a field has, HR as a profession has, to transform into this collective of beings who truly are connected to themselves and therefore can show up authentically to set the stage for everything else. Because if that is not there, HR as a profession can't give what the profession doesn't embody, right? Exactly. It's like, if I put beef in my stew, it is not called beef stew, it's just vegetable stew, right? So how do we get the HR organizations, the HR folks, to get to that point where they truly understand who they are and their purpose?
That's a very, very viable question, Dr. Cass. And I am going to start off still on this note, still piggybacking on what we had talked about before. I think it just comes down to being authentic to yourself and realizing that we are in the business of people. Over the years, HR has truly transformed into being this profession that is so centric on business aspects and outcomes, forgetting the fact that we are not fully or even close enough to an AI integration at the moment. So that aside, but we're going to just hang on to that for a little bit. So when we talk about HR in that space and how HR can represent the company, positively by being true, by being authentic in their approach to human capital management. For me and my analysis and just my entire study on this subject, it goes back to from HR being moved to an administrative or tactical kind of job function to one where we're eventually finding our voice in the C-suite executive, as part of the C-suite executive, the table decision makers, and how impactful the profession in itself is contributing to the bottom line. And we all know this. We talk about HR metrics. We talk about KPIs that help us achieve or measure these goals, outcomes, and things like that. But those are business-driven initiatives that we always have to understand, and which is very important. But the focus is coming back to connecting with people, connecting with a fellow human being, and realizing that I am actually a representative of the company to the workforce. And in that case, I have to model my behavior. I have to model my approach um, to how I work and integrate and even associate with fellow colleagues and employees, assets of this organization in a comfortable manner. In the sense that we know how communication goes a long way in the space of HR or even organizations as a whole. How truthful are you communicating to stakeholders? How truthful are you being to employees? So oftentimes you kind of have to extrapolate this and take a look at it both from an individual perspective and what the HR organization actually stands for. Sometimes there is a biased approach with how some HR professionals are able to handle this discussion in itself, or the topic of being honest, truthful, transparent, vulnerable even to an instant, showing empathy to a great extent, and connecting with employees. That can be broken into several segments, but it takes someone with a very great skill in human observation and just psychology in itself to realize that in as much as we are all so very different, it comes down to the fact that we as human beings want to feel valued. We want to feel ennobled, using your word right there. We want to feel valued. We want to feel included in the discussion. We want to feel like we're not just a money-making machine or ideas of capital to the company, but as part of the company, bringing our true authentic self to the organization. And in that aspect, because we spend close to 80+% of our lives in the workforce. Mm-hmm. So why can't we just be seen as human beings? Why can't we just be valued for whom we are as the people versus what we can produce or what we can't produce or what we can contribute or what we can contribute? So going back to the skill set of HR, it takes a lot. It takes someone who is patient in that regard, but at the same time, quite mature in human psychology and approach, as well taking into consideration demographic knowledge and experience as well. Because the workforce demographic has changed and there's a mixture of age and several other things in the whole mix. So how you're able to work around that, how you're able to see that as well as part of your competency is key in that approach. So.
Very well said. And ultimately, we're all in the people business, right? Not just HR.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are people. We are in the people business because whatever we make are made by people, goods and services. Whatever we deliver are delivered to people. And all the choices made have an impact on people. All our stakeholders are people. Martians, I always jokingly say, Martians are not coming yet. So we're all we have. So let's make this work, right? Absolutely. And it's so interesting you brought the point that KPIs and all of those are there, but we are humans first. That's true for the entire organization, not just for HR.
Yes.
A lot of times people forget. I've always had this conversation. My HR teams always say, Cass, you're the CFO. You have a seat at the table. We don't. We have to fight to get our voices heard.
Right.
And I always remind them, you know what? You don't need to fight to get your voices heard because even finance is a behavioral science. We can come up with the best formulas and the best strategies. But if we can't influence our stakeholders to do certain things, we can't see the outcome. So every strategy is anchored on people, and every outcome is because of people.
Right.
Everything else are input to that, But the common thread is we're all people. Finance is not a pure science. Finance is a combination of accounting, economics, and psychology, because the financial results are the human choices people make. If it's all about facts and numbers, imagine we all know you invest in stock when the prices are down and you sell them when the prices are up.
Yeah.
Simple. But when do people dump the stock? When the economy takes a dive, it's like, oh my God, I better dump this before I lose more value.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Media drives our actions, right?
Yeah.
Psychology drives our actions, not formulas and choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we understand the human aspect of business? And all functions work with HR, and HR work with all functions. KPIs is the outcome of a human chain reaction. So if we want those results, what is the root cause? Who are driving the root cause? Let's address those. So where do you see that actual human-centric partnership taking place between HR and finance? Is a very critical human connection that we have to make in every organization.
Right.
Where do you see that happening, and how can we make it happen more often? Make it a norm.
Okay. So this question in itself and this dialogue actually comes up quite often when you talk about HR podcasts and HR professional interviews and things like that, and even HR literatures. So it goes back to HR being seen as a cost center, which is so sad. HR has always been viewed and observed as a secondary value driver, which is great, just like every other value drivers out there. But over the years, we have come to realize that there is the need to quantify our input into the organization. And how best do we do that? Is by utilizing, again, it comes down to cherishing, right? It comes down to cherishing the talents that HR has sourced, recruited, onboarded, and brought into the organization because of the unique talent that they have. So when you take a look at that and you sit back, even from an analytical point of view, if you were to sit at the table with someone who is maybe like a finance manager and having this dialogue or this discussion of HR not being part of the value chain, bringing in, contributing to the bottom line. And you look at that and you say, well, if we were to take a look at the assets that we have brought in, let's go back and assess the production team, for example, and what the performance was within period X and Y, and what was missing in that period for them not meeting their objectives or their goals. It goes back to talents that were sourced and the skills that these talents bring into the organization to also impact the bottom line. So HR starts creating matrix based off of that. And with those matrix, we are able to quantify and objectively present data showing an increase either in sales, market outreach, customer integration to the bottom line, and which is impacting the profit and loss statement in itself. More sales are being made. Customers are being heard from the marketing point of view, and results are driven from customer feedback because HR is integrated in that space. By having that dialogue, having that oneness of objective with other functions. You talk about marketing, you talk about research and development, you talk about finance, you talk about sales, so it's that relationship building and being able to draw the matrix out of all of those different units, business units, and also sitting back, looking at the performance and seeing how each individual has contributed to the entire, the overall objective of the organization. Whether it's profit making or it's non-profit making. And that's why HR analytics is such a big thing right now, because it's the data that drives the results. And with that, you're able to kind of reel in and pull in the interest of stakeholders, because that's what they want to see. But at the same time, we need to give credit and respect to those who have contributed immensely to these outcomes, which are the employees. So that's what, I'm just going to leave it right there.
No, it makes total sense. And it's true that organizations love to put things in specific neat little boxes, right? Accounting, HR, we're IT, we're all cost centers, right?
We are, which is so sad that they don't look at that.
Right? So I always jokingly say, yes, the CFO team is a cost center, but if you don't do what we're asking you to do, most of you are going to be in jail. So think about that.
Which is very true.
I normally tell them to pick if they want horizontal stripes or orange, because that's going to be the choice. But taking a step back, KPIs, key performance indicators, are of three different persuasions, right? There are leading indicators, real-time indicators, lagging indicators. A lot of times organizations put too much emphasis on the financial indicators, but they're always lagging indicators. At best, they are 35 days too late. You have to close the month, and fifth day of the new month is when you have last month's details. I always remind folks, if you run your business purely on your financial KPIs, imagine that you're driving your car only looking at the rearview mirror, nothing else. And there are only two places you will go, and neither of them are pretty: the morgue or the ER.
Oh boy.
Right? Because there's no place to go. You're only looking backwards, and you can't change what has happened. It has happened. Right?
Yeah.
The real-time indicators are always business process and customer service indicators. That's as you're delivering service, you can measure. Leading indicators are almost always human-related indicators. Have we brought the right people in? Do we have the right culture? Are we integrating the right skills and the right people and using people's knowledge, skills, and abilities to drive our strategy? All the human capital indicators are leading indicators, and some are real-time indicators. Right. So when when I'm driving a car, I need to be able to look through my windshield, for crying out loud, right? I lived in Chicago for so long. We only had 2 seasons, winter and construction. Either way, you need to see what's in front of you, or you're up a creek without a paddle, right? So I need my side mirrors. That is my real-time indicators that are my process and my customer service, how I'm landing as I'm driving, right? So how do I integrate all of this, and even a KPI conversation, reminding people, let's not put the cart before the horse. Our people are the horse. We need to make sure we got the right horse pulling the right cart in the right direction. And we're making the conditions suitable for the horse to do what the horse is supposed to do. I can't put nails all over and then blame the horse for not running fast. So even in a KPI conversation, it's so important to have that leading real-time lagging indicator perspective. And I always use the car analogy because everybody drives, everybody knows the importance of being able to see when you drive. And also keeping in mind, no matter how well your car is made, there are blind spots.
They are.
There are blind spots, and KPIs are not going to catch everything. And who are our blind spot watchers? Who are our strategic partners? And those are also people. Now, all of a sudden, we're having a different conversation.
I know.
How open do you think the SHRM Society and the folks in the human aspect of business will be open to engaging and exploring this?
Okay. Sorry, but exploring what aspect? Just to
Taking a balanced view to KPI and learning to have this conversation this way and showing up in a way that we are reminding people we're bringing the horses. Don't put the cart before the horse.
right. I think Sherm has a very great framework when it comes to KPI and how important it is, and also the whole idea and reason why we do utilize leading and lagging indicators. As a SHRM certified professional, those are part of what's embodied in their competency and a framework. We need these indicators to help us predict, to help us observe what has happened in the past and how past experiences can help us move closer to our objective and goals in the future, right? So with that, I think Shem has done a very great job in exploring those concepts, and I think for everyone who is SHRM certified, those discussions and literatures and articles and even from their entire framework it used to be a body of competency, but now it's called the BASC, has been honed in, as a very key competency for anyone going into HR to observe, which falls into the business aspect of HR. So that's understanding your business acumen and knowing how well these indicators play a very vital role for companies. And HR has to be able to learn that, understand how it works, and also use it to the advantage for the company. So a lot of these indicators can be derived from past financial reports, meeting with your marketing team to understand historically what has happened and how, what the goal is for the future. So again, it comes down into building that rapport and stakeholder involvement and relationship as well to get these informations, analyze them critically, and have this open dialogue of how we can contribute into the space. What's missing? What's lagging? What's the gap trying to tell us in this instance? And what discussions we need to have with regards to helping those functions thrive and do really well. And I think that's where the respect and the stakeholder involvement and just the relationship building aspect of it just come in with HR, because then we're seen as valued partners and that we're interested in helping them succeed.
Very well said. And for those who are not from the HR world, SHRM is the professional credentialing body for HR. So they make sure that all the human capital, technology related, and evolving, emerging elements of human resources management are all provided to folks, and folks remain current. So as we are talking about HR, human resources, I would be remiss if I don't point out the fact that the reason we call it human resource is that there are three resources that are scarce: time, money, and people. We have to always optimize to them. They're called resources for a reason, because we need to know what resources we need, how much time we have, how much money we have, and what are the skills, capabilities, and knowledge we have in our human pool that we can make this happen. Because if we don't have the resources, then that becomes a constraint. It becomes a bottleneck. And our resources are an asset. Praveen here mentioned that we need to start calling human resources human assets, right? So assets are debits on a balance sheet, right?
Yes.
Your money is an asset. Time doesn't go on a balance sheet, and people don't go on a balance sheet. So one of the things we want to be careful is when we use a financial term, we want to make sure that it doesn't give an unintended connotation, right? Because think about it, we say social responsibility, but because it doesn't go on a balance sheet, nobody thinks it's important.
Absolutely, I agree.
Reputation doesn't go on a balance sheet. People don't care about it. Anything that goes on the financial statement is what is paid attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want to box human resources into that financial model, because the financial model is not, the accounting model is not everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because it only captures in black or white what can be attached with a number.
With a number, absolutely.
So economically, what we define as cost is very different from what we define financially, accounting-wise as cost. Accounting cost is only the things we pay money for. Mm-hmm. Economically, the cost is the missed opportunity, the road not taken, the choices on the table. Mm-hmm. And those have consequences. So just wanted us to remember that the human resources is used very pragmatically, and it's a larger meaning with a deeper impact than use of the word just asset, because asset is a financial word.
It is a financial word, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to open this up for a conversation with our audience. I know we started a little late, so we can take 10 minutes and have a conversation. I am going to let anybody in our international audience here ask any question they have, share any thoughts they have. Go ahead, Dr. Bowie.
Hey, great show. A lot of great content to talk about finance and humans, how they, are involved in the whole conversations of driving business success. We always talk about, people make the numbers. Numbers don't make people. Okay. So, what Dr. Cass has talked about is very important, is because, what we see on the financial statements when we do all that and you see a market value, like you are looking at the sheets, but when you actually sell it and what it would be worth on the market are very different from what it shows on the statements. A company might be worth 300 million, but when you're ready to sell it, that market value is a lot different. It could be 600 million, right? That difference in that component is the goodwill, the people, the intangible assets that then show up that will determine the market value of an organization. So people are important drivers of organization success. I don't think a lot of people have made that connection yet. We still today often talk about people are our greatest assets, but very little organizations actually believe in that. And so that's why, you have ones that are really thriving and successful because they believe in it. And then ones, vast majority of them are not at that stage because they don't believe in it. So really great conversations about finance and people, because these are important topics. I think as we move more towards the service economy, this is going to be a very important component, that people are really the true source value creation organizations today in this service economy. So really important topics to discuss. And, there's a lot of work to be done in HR today, because, I've seen, when employees always ask me, like, whose side is HR on? And because, there is a lot of corporate social justice today. We see like people often feel like, is there trust enough in HR? Are issues and problems swept under the rug because they represent the organization or not? We talked about previously many conversations between you and I about how HR just kind of practice the ethical aspect of, really representing is not about whose side they're on, but just practicing ethical HR to ensure that all voices are heard on both sides,
I agree with you, Dr. Hugh. I think it's pretty sad, when you hear employees express their frustration that way. You've been there, I've been there, taking a look at or asking the question, whose side is HR on, And I think this is getting to be such a burden as well within this field, because while HRs tries as much as they can, or HR professionals try as much as they can to find a balance between representing the company and at the same time giving equal representation to employees. I think it comes back to realizing that in a lot of ways, or even to a greater part of the scale, HR does represent employees, should represent employees, and should look for the best interests of employees, because a lot of the active laws instituted especially in the United States of America protect employee rights. So realizing that and seeing that, it's a very intellectual and experienced HR professional knows that to build that measure of trust, which can also impact the overall health of the organization, is letting the workforce know, or your employees know, that you are a trusted partner. And regardless of what their experiences might have been, because in my case, and why I actually decided to go into the field in itself, over the couple of years, is seeing that like HR professionals, and not all the same, individual bias also plays a great role in the profession itself. So while people are in the field and the discipline of HR, they bring in their bias as well. And sometimes they don't work in harmony or for the good of the organization, as you talk about misplaced trust or distrust, misguided communication. It comes down to the individual and realizing that, can I trust this HR person as a whole? Or do I need to reach out to a different HR professional or person within the organization who I can find trust in and see to be on my side, to hear me and to listen to me and to help me, navigate the politics within the organization or whatever workplace issue I might be going through. So yeah, I agree with you in that regard.
And what an important point to bring up, right? Thank you, Dr. Hugh and Solomon. Appreciate you sharing your perspective on this. Ultimately, it goes back to where we started this conversation, right? If HR doesn't know who they are as a being, they're only focused on what they're doing. And for them, they will do whatever it takes to keep their job, because their entire identity, it's not just HR, everybody. Everybody's identity is wrapped in their job. Therefore, they will make that job work at the cost of everything else, right? So when an HR organization is about getting the job done, then it doesn't matter how much we tell people, you can trust me. Trust is earned. It's not asked.
Yes, exactly.
And the way I show up is always, do I know who I am? And can I stand in my truth and stand in my purpose? And can I be the soul of where I stand? And can I speak truth to power? Mm-hmm. Me being kind, compassionate, and generous has nothing to do with me having a backbone and speaking the truth and speaking it with clarity and emphasis. Sometimes people tell me, oh my God, Cass, you're mad at me. I'm like, no, this is the point where I am taking a stand. And I can take a stand and still be kind. Being kind doesn't mean I'm a pushover and you can walk all over me, right? Mm-hmm. So do we teach people, and do people know that balance? And how do we make sure, not just HR professionals, this is a problem even with finance professionals, right? To keep the job, they will do whatever it takes. If people didn't do the wrong thing, we wouldn't have had subprime crisis. We wouldn't have time after time after time economic collapses. People show up to do whatever they're paid to do, and their justification is I have to put food on the table.
Right. Okay?
But if you're putting food on the table by selling your soul, then what have you accomplished? Why should anybody trust you? Right? So this goes back to that original question, profession neutral. Who are we? Am I my job or am I me? Is my job going to tell me how I'm going to behave? Or is my authentic self going to show up and tell me, I am willing to pay a price larger than my investment because I'm standing to do the right thing, right? Almost, I'm not Christian, but I'm going to say it's Christ-like. I do an exercise with my students. I give everybody a deck of cards and ask them to choose 3 values that are important to them. And then I give them different scenarios and say, in this scenario, which value will you give up? Somebody with no cards in their hands at the end of it have no values because they will not give up their life for anything. And then turn around and look, I'm not Christian, so I can bring this up. Jesus Christ gave his life for a reason. There was something worth more than the life itself. What do you stand for? Josephson's Institute of Ethics talks about if you're not willing to pay a price larger than everything that is worth to you, then you don't have ethics.
So Dr. Cass, you bring up a very interesting conversation. And I think, when you talk about the HR space, you talk about mostly which this conversation revolves around. I think, it comes down to how hurt a lot of workforce have been over the years of how they have been treated by the supposed HR representatives or HR function. Hoarding of information, mistrust, misalignment, not being transparent to the fullest, and just so much. So you see this, especially post-pandemic, of how the workforce has changed into one that talents are now starting to realize whom they are. And in that same sphere, you need to understand that organizations are also, or that are driving or tapping into this prediction, are seeing this change in behavior and realizing that they can also model their mission, their vision, and overall organizational culture and cultural health to absorb the human element into their operations. So over the last 4 or 5 years, especially post-pandemic, well, post-pandemic mostly, we have all come to a place in our minds. I think it brings us back to the mindfulness of being human beings.
Very well said. And I love how you said we have to remember we're all one race. We are the human race, right? There is no other. Yeah. So if you come from that place of we are one, and we are here to collaborate and drive our shared purpose, then everything falls into place. I cannot thank you enough for making the time to join us in this conversation, share your insights and thoughts. Thank you for being a part of our Goldilocks community. We welcome you to come and engage in a conversation anytime you want. You're officially a member of the Goldilocks community, and none of us have, I think, except for Robin and Alicia, none of us have real Goldilocks. But hey, it's a psychological framework, and it's how we show up. So feel free to join us. And
absolutely.
Thank you. And we will not be able to have these conversations and continue to build our shared prosperity if not for our audience, both synchronously and asynchronously. So thank you for joining us and watching our episodes. Thank you for participating live, bringing your perspectives and conversation in to truly build a vibrant society. Feel free to go to our YouTube channel and catch our episodes. You will be able to catch this one and all prior ones. Google Transform with Dr. Cass, and you should be able to catch all of our prior episodes and all the insightful conversations. And remember, the entire point of building the Goldilocks community is so that we can help each other get this just right. We are in this together, and every one of our human interactions is our opportunity for transformation. So let's go out there and transform lives. And in the process, remember that you are a being and your life too is going to be transformed.